So this was suggested by Mars in the chat. This is Calamity Ganon Phase 2 from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild OST. So I've listened to a few songs from Breath of the Wild so far. There's always a Zelda song that gets suggested whenever I do this. So let's do it. I'm gonna listen through once for vibes and then again for analysis. Here we go. Okay. Right away, big, like, threatening stabs. Some, like, triumphant fanfare with rising roots under it to make it sound more tense. Yeah. Oh, it, like, skips ahead a beat there, it sounds like. This time signature is kind of wild. I can hear like little things slipping in and out, like beats. Okay. So now we have a tonal sounding melody here against the backdrop. Brass doubles it in the background. Or echoes it. Okay. Some downward, like, string or staccato arpeggios. Rising choirs. And they just keep rising. And it repeats that same phrase. It rises faster. Crashes. Okay, that's where I think it loops. And those big, like, crashes at the beginning once it loops around seem to pick up after the, like, crashes that came just before it in that transitional part. I like that rising melody. It sounds like it's in like a Phrygian scale or something. Or some kind of like harmonic, like minor or major. There's this little like call and answer between the dun 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 on the strings and the choir coming in, like they start at different times, like opposite beats in the bar. Yeah, and then the rising part again. Yeah, this is very final bossy. It's very elevating challenge, elevating threat. It's big, it's thunderous, it's epic. Okay, yeah. And then it starts out back at the beginning with those big hits, those big stabs. Okay. Okay, but before we break that down, let me tell you something. I don't have a sponsor for this video. My efforts are funded by generous contributions from viewers like you through Patreon. If you want to see more of this, and you want to hear more of my stuff than anybody else can right now, go to case.dog/join, or click that link up in the card and become a moonling. That's where you get to hear my unreleased music, get access to a VIP chat in my Discord where I post the evolution of my tracks as I work on them. You can get the master stems to my 100+ songs that I've put out. And there's tiers where you can see your name in a lower third in the video, which you're about to see. Thanks for listening, and yeah, I do have blue hair now. Back to the video. So, It's big and cinematic and epic, but it sounds like it uses a lot more gamey, a lot more Zelda kind of tropes than the usual big symphonic orchestral kind of shit. It's definitely evoking where it is and not just trying to sound big and epic. It's trying to sound like a big epic Zelda track. So let's... What key is this in? So right at the beginning, we're hitting these A's. And it sounds like the bass is also pedaling like an A sort of thing. So yeah, we have this thing going on in the bass where we do like a half step thing and then walk up intervals from the minor third, major third, and then the fourth. It's doing something like that. And that is sort of just kind of rooting you back to A, right? These are all notes that want to fall back to A in the context that they're in. It could also be doing that and hitting a tritone kind of thing. I think it's actually doing that. And then it sounds like it moves up a half step. And then by the time it goes down and does more of those stabs, it just sits back on A and does the same thing. And this is actually going up the scale. It's not exactly modulating. It's sort of following the rest of the intervals of the scale as it does that, it sounds like. Then it sounds like we go down to F. We have this choir thing that's also rocking. It's doing like a high octave of F. Sounds like the bass is also doing F. This would be our 6 if we started in A, right? So now we're doing that same sort of pattern, but in F, down on 6. We're doing something like that. Yeah, and then we get to back to A. Done. And we just have this chromatic line, it sounds like. And then everything sort of builds onto that. And at the end it does a... like, it trails up instead of down. And it sounds like, what does it add there? Adds a third, and then it adds... Okay, then it adds a 6th. So it adds another major third above that. And it's stacking very quickly. And then I guess if this is a 3rd and this is a 6th, then is it going to stack another octave on top? It does. So that's a cool thing about thirds. If you stack thirds along a scale, this is major thirds. You will get a 3rd, then you will get a 6th, and then another major third would bring you back around to an octave. So like, if you stack major thirds, it actually stacks cleanly within an octave. the same way that stacking a fourth and a fifth does. So you can get this, like, augmented chord out of doing that, right? It's literally 1/2 step off from being a perfect triad. You just have to replace this with this major third with a minor third, and then you have to replace this third jump with a fourth, right? And you can do the same thing if you stack sixths. You actually just spread that out another octave. So if you stack the 6, you actually end up back on a major third and then back on an octave again. So that's a cool relationship between thirds and sixths, rather. And I think if you stack a minor third, you get a diminished seventh, which then can also fill an octave, which is interesting. And the same thing if you stack, I believe, this would be a major sixth, right? Yeah. So if you stack the major sixth, you would get this, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You get that, like, tritone interval, and then if you go a sixth above that, you get that original, like, minor third, right? And then, from there, stacking another sixth onto that gives you the octave. So, this one takes you across 1, 2, 3, 4 octaves, right? If you have to stack a minor sixth. And it does functionally the same, like, thing where it wraps around, except it puts a tritone interval in the middle. It needs that as, like, a gateway to get through. The major thirds, however, cleanly 1 octave. Really interesting. But yeah, that's my whole aside, just because I heard that stacking an augmented chord in that chromatic section. I just wanted to explain, like, that's a cool and effective way to do that and still sound dissonant. Here's music theory. Let's keep going. So we start on the 5th of the root that the song started with, and we start rising from here. Chromatically. And then we go back up. I mean, back down to E and then start doing the same thing. So now we're on E again, right? And I guess it's going to go up to... It's going to climb back up to A, while this E is going to stay in place. That sounds like what it's doing here. Ah, yeah, and then it lands 1/2 step above the note that we started with that brass. Everything else is just hitting. But because of that brass, we have this sort of, like, interplay between, and then once we get to that 1/2 step below A, then we just stab on that a bunch of times, right? And then, so right now we have a 1/2 step, which wants to resolve down to A, and we have a fifth, which wants to resolve down to A, right? And that's what it does. And we're back in A. Yeah, so it goes through A to B flat, which is 1/2 step up, to A again, and then to F. So this doesn't do a usual kind of threatening. A lot of times in like threatening like boss music kind of stuff, we hear the minor 7. This skips over the minor 7 and goes to the minor 6. And that is pretty cool. That's not super expected, but it does sound more threatening and more dire. It doesn't sound like a way to bring us back to like a triumphant like return. Like that sounds a bit too cyclical and routine. This introduces a little bit of this and then goes down to 6. Right? Gives us some of them stabs. So this is mostly sticking between A and sometimes using F as our key center. And when it does that, it will eventually go back to A. When it goes to E and starts doing those rising... When it does that, the way that it goes to E, the functionality of it going to E, is sort of just it being the 5 of a 1, of the root that we started with. We want to have those tight resolutions and stuff, and if you have a big tense section that you want to have extra tense because it just does like a chromatic rise constantly, a good way to do that is to start it on 5. You're going to be key agnostic anyway because you're doing chromatic notes, so it doesn't matter if we are in E for that part or in A. It's all fucking chromatic. Let's check out some of the melodies here. So right away we have a major third over the what sounds like is a minor third in the bass. And it sounds like we do a just the presence of that major third being there like gives this a more heroic kind of quality. It's like defying the odds of what's around it. I think we listened to another Zelda boss fight that was like this, where it had like some big lumbering chords and whatever, and the melodies were like a lot lighter and a lot more detached from the goings on of the rest of what's underneath them while still following like the rhythm and meter and stuff. Okay, and then we land on a 5 of the root, right? So we go up this scale, essentially. What is that? That's a mode, I think. I can't remember the name of that mode. It's major with minor 6 and 7. What is that? That's not Mixolydian, is it? Wait. That's minor 6 and major 7. Mixolydian flat 6? I don't know. So then it moves up to the half step. Okay. Okay, so what's cool about this is we were using this as like a major interval of the first chord, right? Like that. And when we hit that same note while this is moved up, it's playing a minor chord here now, and this is now the minor third interval because everything else has moved up a half step, right? And it actually changes the key, like the scale it's playing in. It does something like that. So, okay, so we rise up, we end up hitting a high, like A, that's the root. And this goes back to doing its thing. And we get hit with this tritone thing. That stabs in as we go back to the root. I'm definitely hearing those intervals. So you can hear that thick dissonance creep in with the tritone there. Mixolydian is minor 6 and 7. Wait. That's minor 6. That's minor 7. Okay, yeah. But then it also... So it does just change key as it moves up. That's interesting. Yeah, because it doesn't... It does that the first time, and then... It does that the second time. So it's like changing the key with the ascension as it does it. It changes some of these half steps here, right? Okay. So we're doing something like that. Ah. So now we have this thing where it stabs on the A major here. Or it actually doesn't. It just kind of hits an A. While the root goes to F. It sounds like. And this here is like a major third of F. We occasionally jump up to the 4, which is a half step up. Also that half step that we were using from the A before, right? So, and this essentially paints us a full chord again. This returns to the root, but the key center is changed under it. It's sort of like entering a different phase in a boss battle, right? Also does a little bit of half step stuff there, right? Is there another melody? Yeah. It's like some weird chromatic bullshit. It does that weird, like, this is just like an atonal kind of chromatic motion it's doing here. Steps up a half step. Goes up to the major third. Steps back down to the half step up, and then steps into a half step below the major 7 of the key center, right? Then it steps up to this weird... This is a tritone of our root we started with. Or not the root we started with, but the root we're in currently. So it is trying to be very creepy and atonal, whereas the previous melody was trying to sort of be happy and lighthearted against the backdrop of everything else, sort of like the small hero against like a larger backdrop kind of thing. This melody here is very, very threatening and very ominous, and just wants to lead you to threatening places. And Loves those tritones. Yeah, and when it is an E here, it actually is doing the same, like, pedaling thing on E that it was doing before. So it actually does, like, modulate a half step down, sort of, and then, you know, brings us into 5 of A territory, right? And the melody here is just rising chromatically. So yeah, that's basically everything that's going on in this song. This is pretty cool. It does some things that I've heard with final boss music before. It does some other interesting things. It skips over using quartal or quintal harmony and instead hits us with that stacked harmonic, like, or chromatic, using the different, like, intervals of an augmented chord, like an augmented major, which means that all of these, like, voices in that part actually skip up 1/2 step before the note that the last one started with. And lands there the same, right? So, bonus points for doing something a little bit more creative than quartal harmony. That's cool. What else? What else can I say? It's very thunderous. It does some similar things to other, like, Zelda boss fights we've heard before. I think this executes all of those kinds of themes a little bit better. The way that it loops back is also pretty intuitive because, like, hearing those stabs in, like, right from the get-go, that's going to be threatening, right? But the fact that there's that whole build section that ramps up to a bunch of those stabs make those stabs when it comes back in more relevant than if you, like, heard them the first time. So, like, the effect changes and you're sort of, it gracefully spits you back out at the top of the action, basically, where this has to build back up to itself, and it does that successfully, effectively, in my opinion. I like the way that it jumps around keys isn't obnoxious. It does do a similar thing. It does this half step up kind of thing. When it goes to F, it eventually goes to a half step down. But all of the, you know, the bass patterns being, like, really consistent and really chromatic through those whole things, really good for boss kind of music, I would say. This, you know what? I'm between 4 and 5 here, right? Because this is probably the best, like, Zelda boss theme I've heard so far, I would say. But I don't know. Because the thing is, it's so unlike all of the big orchestral, like, JRPG kind of boss fights. It is far more characteristic and individual than a lot of that other stuff I've heard. It uses some of the same elements, uses some of the tritone stuff. It doesn't veer into anime chords. It doesn't veer into triumphant anime chords. It doesn't even try to have, like, the triumphant section at all. The way that Zelda boss music tends to delineate that is by having a happier melody, like a more heroic sounding melody that doesn't go with what's around it. And this features that. And this also counters it with a very foreboding melody that sort of drags the chords and everything along with it. And I think that's really good musical symbolism for, like, a final boss, like a final showdown in a game. So, you know what? 5 out of 5 for Calamity Ganon Phase 2. That's my rating. 5 out of 5. Full Moon. That's the first one. All right? We're starting off on a high note. And it's that note. Yeah, that's Calamity Ganon Phase 2. Thanks, Mars, for suggesting that one. That's from Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. All right, how do you think I did? If you like the analysis, hit like. If you want to see more stuff like this in the future, hit subscribe and the bell to make sure you see when new videos go up. Let me know what you think. Is there anything you think I missed or glossed over? Let me know in the comments. I would love the feedback. I'll see you next time.